Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another exciting episode of the Vinny Eastwood Show, broadcasting live on American Freedom Radio for the benefits of the Five Eyes Network, who want to surveil everybody, but they can't, so they just surveil themselves and then share their information with everybody. It's a beautiful loophole. I love it. My very special guests joining me today are Mark Passio and James Corbett. No, Max Egan today. Apparently, the Flat Earth assault has begun. Now, I wanted to, today it's about how you stay true, essentially, because in any kind of media or any kind of field or whatever, there's always temptation of some description. Oh, my ego's getting the better of me, or something of that nature. And so I reached out to Mark Passio and James Corbett and Max Egan, three guys who seem to be keeping it together and not becoming corrupted as the decades go by, and just ask them a few little hints and tips. So, first of all, just introduce yourselves, gentlemen. James Corbett, go first.
I'm James Corbett, CorbettReport.com. Been living and working in Japan for a decade and a half now, and I've been doing the website for 12 years now. So if you haven't checked it out yet, why not? What are you doing?
Yeah. Is that the sunny climes of Western Japan?
The sunny climes of Western Japan, indeed. I haven't used that phrase enough lately, but yeah.
I remember correctly. God damn it. Mark Passio.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Passio of WhatOnEarthIsHappening.com. I'm an independent researcher and public speaker from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on the East Coast of the United States.
Okay, so first question on the ball today is, what kind of temptation is there to bow out of the truth movement in general? Has there ever been any kind of temptation? For me, it's kind of like a burnout point or something like that. You approach burnout, you have to stop for a minute, but no, it's like The Godfather. Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. Some kind of crisis will get me out of my funk or whatever, and I'll come straight back in.
I guess I could speak a little bit to that because I definitely went through some burnout in the past. It can definitely happen, especially if you continue to just go and go and go. You don't want to take a break when you really know what we're truly up against, and what it means for the future of our species. So the temptation can be to just push too hard, push oneself too hard, because you really know what's at stake deep inside your mind and your heart. And you have to be aware that that can have a lot of physical repercussions, and it can have a lot of emotional and mental repercussions. So you need to also balance doing the great work of telling the truth to everyone in the world and putting this information out there to the public in hopes of a more massive awakening. You have to balance that work with internal self-work and taking care of the self, because you could very easily go to a level of stress and depression, even when you see how bad things really are, that it'll become counterproductive, and then it'll harm your ability to really do the work that you want to do effectively.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple of advantages, I think, over a lot of people in this space. One of which is that I am geographically halfway around the world. I live in Japan and interact with people in Japan in Japanese every day. So I can actually turn off the computer and actually disconnect from this insanity and craziness that I'm looking at every day. And I do that every day. There's a certain point where I'll go outside and live the real world, and the discrepancy is so vast that I think that helps to keep me grounded in reality a little bit. I certainly imagine if I was doing this back home in Canada, it would be very different. And I'd probably be encountering people all the time in the real world who know me from my work, and that would be crazy. And I don't know, it's just nice to be completely anonymous here and to just live a sort of normal life. That helps keep me grounded. The other thing that I think is an incredible advantage for me is that I've been exceptionally blessed to be able to do this full time this is the 8th year now. We're going into 8 years that I've been doing this full time as my full-time job. That's crazy. That's amazing. That is not something I take lightly. I don't take that for granted. I know very, very few people get to do that. If I wasn't doing this full time, I can't imagine that I'd be doing the website at all anymore, because now that I have a wife, I have a family, I have children that I didn't have when I started the website, and so I was doing this as a labor of love at 2 a.m, after my regular day job for 3-4 years before I started doing it full time. I could not physically do that now if I was working a regular full-time job. So because I am blessed to be able to do this for a living, I can actually do this. But I think I would have reached burnout a long time ago if it wasn't for that.
You know how some people do fasting and some people do intermittent fasting? I do intermittent burnout. So like basically I'll go real hard for like between 3 and 6 months, and then I'll take between 3 and 6 months off, or depending on how hard it is. Sometimes you just lose people in your life and it emotionally devastates you, and you just can't just sit there in front of the radio. Okay, we're talking about saving humanity or anything like that when you just want to grieve. And ultimately you just got to listen to yourself a lot of the time, because I don't know, I think there was some lady who was doing a TED talk a while ago, and she says, nobody sits you down at age 18 and says, hey, you know how I used to clean your bedroom for you? You've got to do that now. You know how I used to drop you off at school? You've got to do that now. You know how I used to make a breakfast? You've got to do that now. You remember how somebody used to tell you that, hey, it's holiday time now? You've got to tell yourself that now. I'm sick to death of so many people in this world essentially working themselves to the bone and then burning out and not coming back. I've been a part of a radio network for 10 years now. I'm the only host who was there when I began, and that's a huge margin. Essentially, this industry kills off a lot of the competition. I think it's only the strong and the truly dedicated that survive.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that there's a lot of fly-by-night people that come into this for whatever reasons that they may have personally, to want to just step in and then leave. Whether they're looking for their 15 minutes of fame or whether they thought it was going to pay dividends financially. The people who really are true to this understand that they're doing this simply because it's the right thing to do. Because if we don't do this and we don't grow in number of the people who are really speaking the truth to power and alerting our fellow brothers and sisters, in humanity of what's really taking place, and helping them to learn and grow and understand what's really going on within them and around them. If we don't do that, like there is no future. There is no hope for any kind of a world based in freedom in the human future. So, I think people come in with sometimes less than pure motives. That definitely can be the case. They kind of like estimate the landscape, so to speak, to see what it is like to do this and be a public figure. And some of them just find out that it's not the glitz and glamour that they thought it was. And so they go out very easily to the wayside and they don't continue. And some of them find out that it's a lot harder to gain any traction in this community and really garner any type of an audience that will consistently watch the content that you're putting out, and so they give up too quickly. They don't understand that you have to be consistent and persistent in building a listener or viewer base. Or
they succumb to one of those temptations that you mentioned earlier, like, oh, if I just make it clickbaity enough, or if I join this bandwagon that's going along and get on the next trend, then I can be a big name in that new community that's coming up, or whatever it is. So there's always that. I can make it a lot further, a lot faster, burn a lot brighter if I just sell my soul to get my 5 minutes of fame or whatever in the alternative news community. It doesn't seem worth it in the long run, but some people act that way. And, I get it. I get when you're young and you're coming up and you want to get, this is important. I want to get in front of people. How am I going to get their attention? There's always the temptation to take an easy shortcut to that.
Speaking of which,
I would totally agree with that. I see that particularly in like what you said with like trends that are coming up in the so-called truth movement. People will just jump on top of that and try to just monetize that in their YouTube channel just to make, a quick buck. And, it's like I've resisted that temptation from day one and said, I'm not going to live off of other, platforms, advertising. And so all I've ever done is just accept donations and, personal gifts from individuals who want to see see, the work move forward in the way that I do it. So I think that's a big temptation for people, is to just try to monetize what they're doing instead of trying to just put out quality content that other people really value in their lives.
I think somebody touched upon the concept of the family business versus the major mega corporation. And the major mega corporation wants to make as much money as possible right now. The family business, on the other hand, is aware that 3 generations later, their forebears will be walking through the street and their reputations will be known by their name. And so the goal is to make something good today that will last forever.
Yeah, it's the difference between long game and short game. And I've always been in this for the long game. I mean, I see and I understand that short game perspective. Oh, I got to make the, 1 million hits this month kind of thing, or I got to do this. But I've always been like, no, I'm going to be here for people. I don't think people understand this. I am going to be here for decades. I'm going to be here half a century from now, ringing the alarm bell and talking about things the way I see them. And I'm aware of that. So, yeah, it can take you half a century to build up a reputation and get people to understand what you're saying. You could fritter that away in 10 seconds by, jumping on a bandwagon or doing something stupid or some outrageous stunt. But I'm not going to do it because I'm playing the long game. I'm going to be here, and I'm going to, as much as my haters might hate it, I'm going to be here and I'm going to be talking for a very long time to come.
I think you were talking about the long game there, and it seems to me that it's that short-term gratification that a lot of this current generation, the millennial generation, actually suffer from immensely. And I remember, James, you were talking about in one of your videos about the 24-hour news cycle and how you basically ignore it. And you explained why, and it's for good reason, because it comes and it goes, and it has no relevance to really anything, unless, of course, you study into it, you put it into context, and you go, okay, what other 24-hour news cycle pieces of this nature were there? A racial shooting, huge propaganda, that kind of thing. You start to... It's pattern recognition, more or less, isn't it? You realise that certain things have value when they come out and certain things don't. And if you've got a certain level of experience, those things kind of come by instinct. You can sort of tell right away, but of course you have to investigate them before you're fully sure.
Yeah, I was just actually reflecting on that just yesterday. I can't remember why it came up, but I remember thinking about when I put out Why Big Oil Conquered the World. Which in some ways was a culmination of a decade of research, essentially. And it was the best encapsulation I could do of this very big story that's so important and goes into so much history and so much detail. And I tried to lay it out and I put it together in this documentary. And I put it out exactly when the 24/7 news cycle was chasing the tail of the Vegas shootings, the Vegas shooting. That was all anybody in these circles wanted to talk about at that moment in time. And as a result of that, Why Big Oil Conquered the World did not get, I think, the type of attention that it deserved at that time. And it's something that I think about from time to time, because people are so concentrated on this 24/7 news cycle and whatever the story of the moment is. We literally lose sight of the big picture of what's going on. And that's something that we have to try to find a way to monkey wrench and find a way within this paradigm of this platforms and systems that we're using to try to, if not game that system, at least somehow take advantage of the medium to do it in a better way. And it was with that in mind, although it wasn't specifically why it happened, but I did put out the World War I conspiracy documentary in parts, and spreading it out over weeks like that, I think helps to, in this current 24/7, whatever's popping in the newsfeed right now, it helps to get people to realize this is part of a bigger story. And I think that might be one of the ways to try to counteract that instant gratification 24/7, let's push the button and get the information now, what's happening this second mindset that a lot of people are in.
Yeah, I think that just covering current event type situations is that short game, whereas when I decided what I really wanted to talk about with my program and what I wanted to call it, I ended up calling it, of course, What on Earth is Happening. But people, when they hear that, it's not about daily current events on Earth, it's about eternal principles. It's about things that are timeless. It's about cosmic laws and principles that are always going to be here, no matter what happens. And it's that, I think, is the real long game when it comes to helping people to understand what's really taking place from the causal factor level, because we could talk about the events that take place all around us, and they're just always shifting and transforming and slightly morphing into different things. But on at the psychological and spiritual level, it's all the same underlying causes. So that's where I think a lot of people fall short in when they enter this whole arena of thought and of publishing content that they want to put out. A lot of them just focus on the minutia. They focus on one or two things about what they want to focus on, what they want to specialize in, or they only talk about daily happenings, daily events that are occurring around us. But they never really go deeper beneath that to go to the psychological, the spiritual, and the occult factors that really you have to probe very deeply down beneath the surface of just everyday daily events to get to. And that's where the causal factors of the why, what we're seeing happening in the world, that's where the answers to be found about why those things are happening can be found. And that's what I kind of decided to do with my work, which I feel set it apart from a lot of other researchers and publishers in this whole arena. And that's what I feel like is part of the thing that is lacking in the whole truth movement, because a lot of people want to go for the easy thing where they could just pick up news stories and pick up items from here and there and put a patchwork together. But they're still only really looking at the symptoms at that level. To really probe deeper, you have to go into some of those other harder to see factors, which force us to confront ourselves, to do the shadow work and confront ourselves and look at what's going on in the human mind, in the psyche, and at a very deep psycho-spiritual level.
Like in the Never-Ending Story, how he said that when faced with their truth selves, most men run away screaming. And I think it's absolutely true, because we embody all the worst parts of ourselves and the best parts of ourselves at the same time, right? And it's the first time I've ever really had this realization is I'm the worst I can be and the best I can be at the same time. Oh my God. And now the thing is not to try and compress that, because I had a thought about if I'm afraid to say something, or if I'm saying something that's not entirely coming from a genuine place, I get this feeling in me that's kind of like, this kind of disgusted with yourself feeling when you're trying to pander to somebody, when you're trying to tell somebody what they want to hear or something like that. Because for so long, gentlemen, I have said exactly what I think, exactly how I think it, and have not had too many problems. So when it comes to walking on eggshells, my response is, get this person away from me.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. It's almost impossible for me to do that. It's almost like just what I feel or think comes right out of my mouth, and I don't censor that. And I think that that's part of the whole first step of what people really have to do to be true to anybody, is to stop lying to themselves and stop pretending to be anything that they're not, and stop wearing masks. And that involves looking at even the dark aspects of oneself and the dark aspects of one's personality, and admitting where you're at, not necessarily being comfortable to stay there, but just acknowledging, yes, here's part of what I am like that I may not like as much, as it may not be as good as it can be, but you acknowledge that and you recognize, okay, I can work on that, and I'll try to be better tomorrow than I am today. And that's all we can really hope to do, is truly compete with ourselves from yesterday. That's where the real improvement and the real competition lies at. And I think part of what you're saying there, Vinny, is so important, because it really goes down to the first dynamic of, if you can ever tell the truth to anybody else, the first thing you have to do is tell the truth about yourself and who you are, and stop lying to yourself, which is such an important dynamic that it's a thread that runs throughout all the information and teachings that I try to put out there.
It's also, I mean, it's not even just about lying to yourself in some sort of conscious way that you are lying, but that you don't know yourself. And that can be a huge problem. If you don't know who you are, where you're coming from, what you are, why you're saying what you're saying, and how you're saying it, if you don't have a good sense of that, you're not going to last very long, I think, trying to put this message out to other people, because inauthenticity reeks and nobody likes the smell of it. And so you have to know who you are and be grounded in that in order to authentically express yourself. Because otherwise, trust me, people are going to tell you how to think and how to talk and how to act and who to talk to and who not to talk to and what to wear and everything else you can possibly imagine. You are going to be hearing every single day from all sorts of angles. So if you're not grounded and you don't know who you are, that's going to definitely mess with your head. And I see that happen from time to time with some of these people who burn out, who basically just concentrate a little bit too much on what other people are saying and have a little bit less sense, I think, of who they are and why they're doing this in the first place.
James, that's a brilliant point. If I could add an addendum to that, brilliant point that you made there, especially about how the inauthenticity, if it's present in yourself, is really going to show. Especially if you sit and do a long form broadcast or something like that. A friend of mine just recently said he listens to people who do long interviews on certain podcasts or video shows, and he tries to hone in on how they started, their demeanor when they first start the show, and then follow that thread through all the way till the end of like a 3-hour podcast. And it's like very few people can maintain a facade or a mask for a long period of time, especially even week after week after week. So that inauthenticity will absolutely come through to the viewership. And I think at an intuitive level, they will be able to very quickly be able to decipher and see through that mask and determine who's real and who's not pretty quickly. I think people in general are able to smell that deception when they see it and hear it. So I think that's why we have a lot of fly-by-nighters sometimes, because they are basically identified, and people call them out, and they can't keep up that mask or that persona that they're putting forward, and that's why they tend to go by the wayside, as it were. So I think that's a really very on point identification that you made there about someone actually really bringing their own true personality onto the air and being genuine with their listening or viewing audience, because anything other than being genuine like that is going to be seen pretty readily.
I think also at the same time we have to wonder about these the concept of like, how do you get your money, how do you survive, and that kind of thing, because immediately if you are doing this and you are doing it for genuine reasons, you'll understand quite frankly that you do need financing of some description in order to get your thing done. Sure. And because I used to be a salesperson, but I got so traumatized in that job that I can't even pick up a phone and call somebody for money anymore. I've just gone straight for donations and live streaming and all of that kind of stuff, because that way I'm already giving people the content for free, and only if they appreciate it, i.e. appreciate me and the work I've already done for them, then they give me something. And that way I feel that I managed to head off at the pass any temptation I would have to delve into that 24-hour news cycle or jump on the Trump train or any of this other kind of shit. It's like, am I able to survive without a ridiculous amount of stress in my life by doing the right thing and getting rewarded through the universe in an indirect manner for that? Is that the best way to live? I think so, or at least it's the best way I've found so far.
I once heard a spiritual teacher, I can't recall their name off the top of my head in the moment, say that the money of the future will actually be a form of admiration for the deeds that other people do. And that's how we will exchange value. And I think that's what you're reflecting right there in what you said regarding the work that you do, regarding the work that we all do. So if people see the value in it and it has an effect in their lives, and it changes their thinking for the better, and their life is changed for the better as a result of that better thinking and more true thinking and behavior, then they're going to be willing organically to want to contribute value back to your life. You've seen this, of course, I've seen this, and it's like I think that's where people have a hard time even considering. Like I know family members of mine that can't even conceive that I make a living off of doing this, and people are willing to contribute value from their life to my life because of the work that I put forward and how they have perceived that it has a tremendous value to them. And I think that's where real exchange of value lies. And I think it's a very profound thing that would, like that spiritual teacher saying that will be the form of exchange of, quote, currency in the future, will be how much we actually admire and value somebody for the effect that they can actually have upon us in our lives.
Yeah.
That reminds me, actually, one time when my YouTube channel got taken down by Pete Santilli, and I went round to a mate's place with a half a dozen beers just to, be miserable with your mates, that's as you do. And they started giving me shit about it, oh, you should have seen that coming, oh, you should have some backup, oh, where's your money, and all of that kind of stuff. And I go, excuse me, bro, I just got $10,000 donated in the last month or two for a computer that I'm already using. All right, a listener walked into my house and slammed $6,000 in $100 bills down on my desk so I can purchase that computer. Has anybody in your life ever done anything like that for you without wanting interest? All right, and the answer is absolutely no. And the difference is you pay interest for your loans. My street cred pays for mine.
Yeah. I had a couple things to say there, but I forget what I was going to say. But I will say that recently I was thinking, like, if someone were to ask me how I do this, or what's my, or what, as a new podcaster coming up, like what do you suggest? My only advice would be, don't be a businessman. Like, I'm not a businessman in any sense, in any form. I've never made any decision whatsoever when it comes to my content based on business. But I really have, I guess, in a sense, just trusted the universe, or not even trusted, but it's just an experiment. Can I do this without being that whatever, jumping on the next bandwagon kind of guy and chasing after advertising revenue and stuff? Can it be done? And yes, I'm here to say it can be done. It is actually possible. And I know there are people watching this who won't even believe it because they've never tried it, or they don't believe, or they tried and it failed. All I can say is, in my case, it worked. I've never, ever run advertising on anything that I do because it always just struck me as stupid. Like, why am I'm putting in all this work to try to dredge up these connections and this truth and expose these things just so that I can attract people to come watch what I'm doing, so that then I can sell their eyeballs to some company to sell crap to them. That's not at all what I'm doing. That's not why I'm doing it. That's not what I wanted to do. So at first, when I started this, I didn't expect I would ever make any money whatsoever from it. I very quickly encountered, if I want to upgrade my system and stuff, I'm going to need to get a laptop. I'm going to need to get a new computer. I'm going to need to get a microphone. So I started raising funds for that. And eventually I got to the point where, if I want to make the next step, if I want to do this professionally, I'm going to need some sort of steady subscription base. So I started a subscriber function. Hey, $1 a month. Send $1 a month if you like what I do, and you get nothing from it. I don't have a paywall. There's no special fancy, you can only do this as a member kind of thing. So I just started it, and people started signing up. So I felt guilty. So I'm like, I should do a newsletter for these people who are paying me money every month. So I started a newsletter. But even that, I can't, in all good conscience, put that behind a paywall. So even my newsletter, the editorial, is 100% freely available for non-subscribers. Just every step I've made, putting documentaries out there for free, trusting that people with the free documentary 100% can buy a DVD of it if they want, and people do. I mean, none of what I do makes any sense from a business perspective. And I've talked to people before about this, like people in normie world. What do you do? And wait, you put your documentaries online for free, and then people buy DVDs? Why? I don't know. They want to support the work. It doesn't make any business sense because it isn't a business. This isn't what it's about, and it's just a big experiment. But hey, it works. It does work. You've got to put something out there into the universe. You've got to put your work in. But when people see that and appreciate it, absolutely. I've talked about monetary reform and talked to monetary reformers on my program a lot over the years. And one of the things that people point out is, they'll give you the textbook definition of money. It's a medium of exchange. It's a unit of measurement. It's whatever, the three standard uses of money. But that's not it. No, it's a token of appreciation. It's a recognition of work done. It can serve a lot of different functions. And this is essentially what I'm doing now for a living. People are rewarding work that they find valuable. And it's a model that they'll never teach you in business school, but
That's right.
it works if you put the work in.
Speaking of which, I went to first class of Business 101 in university, and it reminded me when they put a slide up of all the successful traits of an entrepreneur, because I'd seen those traits before. At high school, when the school counsellor was giving my mother a pamphlet about ADHD. All right? ADHD and entrepreneur, identical. Okay, so there's a lot of people in this world, you know, I might be one of them or whatever, who think, oh, there's something wrong with me, or there's something wrong that I'm doing, or I don't know how to do this, or whatever the hell. Sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, there's something wrong with the entirety of society, not you. Okay, only sometimes. Most of the time it is you, but you know, you've got to work on that shit. But the other element is, you know, you got to have faith in yourself to do things in your own original way, because if you're not doing it in your own original way, it becomes boring, it becomes generic, it sounds like somebody else. Like, I watched this documentary about Bill Hicks, and when Bill Hicks was a 16, 17-year-old doing stand-up comedy, a lot of the people in the audience said he sounded like this guy, or he sounded like that guy, or that guy, or whatever. And I said, that's not necessarily a bad thing. When you start off, you will see other people's influences on you, but if you keep going and you develop as an artist, more or less, and I think that for a large part, that's what journalism actually is at the end of the day. It's a form of art, because we're creating value. We're taking a whole bunch of disparate ideas that are out in the ether somewhere, and we're compressing them down so that people can look at them as a work, right? And if you develop as an artist, your own internal voice comes out. Like, who did I start off imitating and going out and trying to be like? Trying to be like Alex Jones. It took me about 2 years of acting like that before I realized that wasn't me. And it's never going to be me, and I'm completely different, and I found my own voice subsequently, right? I was just wondering, Mark, James, who did you guys start off acting like somebody and then find yourself in a similar vein?
Well, I think I had certainly had influences. I wouldn't say that I started with the intent on of being like my influences in my own, on air, the way that I did things on air. So I definitely wanted to infuse my own personality and my own aesthetics and just kind of do it my own way. But I certainly had influences that I felt that their work was profoundly impactful upon me and my consciousness and awareness. And so, I kind of wanted to put my work forward, following in their footsteps, so to speak, in the way that they exposed things and put out the truth. But I can't say that I ever tried to actually act like anyone else. I certainly had influences, though.
Yeah, well, none of us are inventing this form from scratch. We all have templates of some sort that we're going from. So there's always going to be people that you're not copying, but it's just, well, that's how it's done, isn't it? Until you figure out maybe there's another way to do it. And for myself, it's funny because I actually did. I wasn't trying to copy, but having as one of my templates when I first started this podcast 12 years ago now, one of my templates was Alex Jones. And I remember one of the early takes of one of my first podcasts, I was like, oh, this is the part where you get angry and you start shouting and you start acting like Alex Jones, right? So I tried doing it and I recorded and I was listening back to it and I'm like, that sounds ridiculous. That isn't me. So I immediately deleted that file and just went with who I am. And it still took me years to figure out just how to talk in front of a microphone like a normal human being, as opposed to sitting here in a room talking to a microphone, which is what I'm physically actually doing. But it takes a while till you realize, no, you're just talking to people and you have to kind of talk as if you would talk to a person. For some reason, it took me a while for that to sink in. So you go back to my early podcasts, it sounds, I don't know, it sounds horrible to me to go back and listen to those, but that's just a process of learning. But it is funny the way that the different templates that we have in our head can sort of take us from different perspectives of what it is that we're doing. One of the things that I think of when I when I think of what I'm doing, I'm Canadian, so I grew up with the CBC and all that, Knowlton Nash and these Peter Mansbridge and these types of broadcasters. Whatever Americans would think of Walter Cronkite, I have no idea what Kiwis would think of. But
John Campbell.
I'm sure you have your templates to go from. But so sometimes I think of it in that news broadcasting sense of like. Not the, and that's the way the world is, but the guy who appears on the screen to tell you what's happening in the world. And then, so when I get feedback from people like, well, what do you think about, like, what do you think about vegan eating or something? I'm like, would you ask that to Mr. News Broadcaster? Like, do you care what he does on that level, or do you care about the information that he's telling you about the world? Are you asking him how to live your life? Like, why are people seeing me as some sort of guru? But I realize, people have different templates of what it is they're even conceptualizing what we're doing is, and one of my templates just seems to be very different from some other people's templates. I'm not a guru. I'm not telling you how to live your life. I'm just trying to give you information about the world.
Well, that's what gurus do. But I got a question in from the chat. Yeah. From Danny Quest, says, do you guys think the alternative media industry is in a good place considering what we've been through this past year? The dictator. The Trump dictatorship. I'm not sure if I understand the question per se. Is the alternative media industry a good place? I don't think it ever was. I think there's good people, individuals who've proven themselves over long periods of time, and you can't really bank on anyone until they've been around a certain period of time and have been through a lot of trials and tribulations. I mean, that's what every hero character in a movie is like, isn't it? You don't understand their character unless you see them in extreme situations and how they react to it, I think.
Yeah, I could say that I think that things in the alternative media community have, in my estimation, gotten worse than when I first entered the quote scene, business, whatever you want to call it. I think that when I was first starting out, I think there were a lot less voices, but I think they talked about a lot more pertinent topics than what I'm hearing today. As the community has grown and gotten a lot bigger, there's a lot more dross within it, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, that's the way that I would word it, where there are so many things that are discussed that are not really pertinent or relevant to what's really going on, that's of critical value in people's lives to really understand the real freedom and how it's being demolished, how it's being dismantled. I think we were in a better situation when we had less voices, but more targeted voices, more on point, over the target voices. Now there's a whole lot of distraction, as far as I'm concerned, because of how many more people are involved in actually doing this, because technology has, become, somewhat easier and less expensive, and more people want to just throw their hat in the ring, so to speak, instead of really doing their homework and really presenting a targeted message. That's my take on it. I think we can improve it in the future. It's not hopeless, but I think people have to really hone in and focus on what's really truly important, and not talk just to hear the sound of their voice, as it were, to really go down to what is most important for people to understand, to really create positive and lasting change. If we have more voices really doing that, I think the alternative community will grow and it will become something much better than it even is today, and even than it was in the past.
Well, Mark, I thank you for reframing that question slightly, from alternative media industry to alternative media community, because that, I think, hits the nail on the head from my perspective. Just hearing the words alternative media industry makes me bristle. I guess there is some sense to which that is true, but that's not the way I conceptualize it. And conceptualizing it in that way, I think, is part of the problem. And I think that goes to what you're speaking about, the difference between, say, a decade ago to today. Is a decade ago, this was still a very minor fringe community that, people might listen to podcasts. What's that? A lot of people didn't even know what it was. And how, I don't understand. You guys are so out there. it's become a lot more mainstreamized over the past decade, and obviously is now having internet culture in general is having more of an effect on the mainstream conversation, is becoming the mainstream conversation in a lot of ways. And with that comes all of the nonsense and garbage that we saw in whatever you want to call it, normie world of a decade ago, in terms of people who had no idea any of this stuff was going on, no idea about this information. Well, now they're all coming on and doing podcasts and, oh my God, did you see what QAnon just dropped? And all of this stuff. And I don't want to make fun of people for being new to all of this and sort of encountering stuff for the first time. And it's a very disorienting process. And so I'm not putting people down for that. But yeah, not having a broader perspective on this to be able to contextualize the information and put it in, and then a lot of people who are just chasing after money and chasing after eyeballs. Well, this is where people are now. People are listening to podcasts and doing this, so I'll jump in and I'll talk even though I don't know what I'm talking about. So it definitely, like with anything, the more popular it becomes, hey, great, more people are getting involved. Oh, wait, wait, more of those people are getting involved. Oh, it's becoming more like that. Oh, so I don't want to be hipsterish about it, but
well, this reminds me of a conversation I had with Ralph Ellis, who talked about the climate cult or anything like that, and he says it's a bandwagon, it's a religion, and people are trying to jump onto it because they love to belong to a group. Now we have a question in here from Ryan Lane. Mark, what is your view on Alan Watts' work?
I definitely like it. It's something that I really went through early on, before I kind of delved into other darker areas of spirituality or the dark occult. I think it's absolutely valuable, and I enjoy his perspective on spirituality and changing consciousness, etc. You know,
I like his,
I think it
concept
Yeah, go
that when you're trying to chase work life and stuff like that, it's like you're being teased all the time from a higher window in the office. Yeah, kitty, climb up that corporate ladder and that kind of thing. But the second you get the bag of money, the second you get the corner office, you realize that it's actually an empty bag. It's an empty office,
right.
and it doesn't make you feel any more fulfilled.
Not creating true fulfillment in one's life. And that's part of, I think, his work that is definitely very poignant, because it's talking about what's actually real versus what is artificial. That's part of what I like about his work that I've taken in to be a big thread throughout my work, is the distinction between the truly genuine and that which is truly of value, as opposed to artificial constructs that people build up in their own mind and ultimately are long-term unfulfilling.
James, any perspective on that or no?
I'm just trying to figure out whether we're talking about Alan Watts or Alan Watt.
I think they said Alan Watts, the
Okay.
spiritualist.
Yeah.
Alan
Yeah.
Watt
That
is the.
sense.
I believe Alan Watt is the conspiracy researcher. If I have
Yeah.
the distinction correct.
I think you're correct about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just sent him a interview request, actually, and if all goes well, just like last time, in another 2 years, I might have him on the show.
By the way, I like Alan Watt's work as well. Without the S, I think that he's done a lot in exposing how the powers that should not be really function, and are. He's done quite a good analysis of how that entire hierarchical structure functions in people's lives. So I appreciate his work as well.
Now, James, you've got to go pretty soon, right? In about 10 minutes?
In 10 minutes or so, yeah.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, if there are any questions for James, pop in the super chats into the chat room there. I've got a question for you. If it is down to your nationality or something like that, because that was kind of the concept of today's show. We didn't have Max Egan on here, because I wanted to have the New Zealander, the Australian, the Canadian, the American, and I was maybe thinking about getting Heinrich from Red Ice Radio and David Icke on here as well. Like, just this big confab,
Nice.
It'd be really fun, the Five Eyes Network. because what's been transpiring in the chat here, a lot of it is that despite the fact that James and Mark, you kind of undersell yourselves and you say, oh no, I'm not trying to do that or anything like that, despite that fact, you've become almost like some of the best at what it is that you do, you know? And that's what I want to get across to people, is that, you know, if you keep cool and you just remain yourself or whatever, and you keep working at your stuff, you can become really good at what you do and not have that fact corrupt you and change who you are.
Yeah. It's absolutely possible. It's something that I think people should take to heart. I think that a lot of people don't start because they're lacking some element of courage or of self-confidence. And it's like I try to tell people when they come up to me and ask me, like, you know, what can I do to really, you know, get involved in this? I tell them to just start, like, just record your own voice. You know, you'll see what it is to do it. You know, when you start actually just doing that, you know. You don't even have to put it out if you don't want to. Just record it on your own computer or whatever you know, device you have, or into your phone, and just listen back. And then do that a few times a week, you know, and you'll see you'll get better as you do it. The first time will be awkward. You know, you'll be unsure of yourself. You might be going, you know, et cetera, you know, but then eventually you'll garner more confidence in your ability to speak to other people through this medium. And then you will just organically do it, and you'll get better at it. And then you'll look at what you did in the past and you'll say, that was pretty bad considering how I sound now, you know, and what I'm doing now has gotten better. And then, you know, you could take that into any aspect of the work that you do. You know, you could take that into production value. You get better equipment, you increase production aesthetics, you know, so this is what people have to just do. They need to start from where they're at. Just don't be afraid to start. Starting is the hardest part, obviously. That's where you have to build the momentum. But then once you do it, you have the momentum going. And it's a little easier to keep it going and to push it forward once you have that momentum built up. It's just like any other law of physics. The more you do it, the more comfortable you become doing it, and the better you'll be at it.
With experience comes expertise, you know, and I think we're very afraid of things we haven't experienced. And then that's that's maybe the very reason why people don't start in the first place. I've got no experience in this. Well, how are you going to get it if you don't get it?
That's it.
You know, just freaking do it.
I'm just spitballing here, so I haven't thought this through. So maybe I don't mean this, but but it occurs to me I wouldn't encourage people who are on the fence or who don't know. I wouldn't encourage them to do it, because from my own experience, it wasn't, I mean, I'm not a very spontaneous kind of guy, like, oh, let's, you know, just completely change my life and do something different. I did, I guess, move to Japan and things like that, but I don't do them on a whim, on a moment's notice. But for the website, it was something that just, it hit me. I'm like, I'm going to start a website. I'm going to do this podcast. And I just started doing it. And I don't even know if I can articulate why. It was obviously just this information I was seeing online, and I gotta start doing this. And hey, look, it's the internet age. We can do this. We can reach all sorts of people. And it happened because I just was impelled to do it. You couldn't have stopped me from doing it back when I started, which if you don't have that motivation in you, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's good to encourage people, but there has to be something burning inside that you want to get out. And if that's the case, then you know, yeah, you're going to figure it out along the way. And you're exactly right. Starting is the hardest part, and it's not going to be great when you start, but you just start and you do it and you do it and you do it and you do it and you get better.
Yeah, that's right. For all of those of you in new sexual relationships, the advice goes twicely there. Now, you just keep doing it and it gets better. Now, I wanted to change gears just a little bit here because, Jamie, you're going to be leaving us in about 5 minutes or so. So I'd like to get you some final parts or words. Mark, are you able to stay for an extra hour or no?
Yes, I can. I need to take one brief break for like 1 moment right now. I'll be right back. Is that okay?
You take a break now,
okay.
and we'll finish off with James, and then when you come back, we'll still be streaming.
Great.
All right, excellent. So, James, the people in this world, what can they learn from the great James Corbett?
Let me just solve all your problems in the next 5 minutes. Right? You got a question for me? I don't know how to answer that.
Well, that's the thing.
What can they learn? I'll tell you what they can learn. They can go to CorbettReport.com right now, and they can see that as we are speaking live right now at this precise moment, there's a very important video up about Mother Nature demands child sacrifice. Talking about the birth strike movement and all this stuff that's coming up about, how can we have children when they put out carbon dioxide and it's going to kill the earth? I think this is one of those subjects that for me is exceptionally important. It's absolutely bedrock fundamental, and it keeps coming back to it. We are literally being programmed to desire, if not death, at least our extermination in some way. And it is absolutely counter to all of our biological programming as human beings to want this. And it's incredible the amount of psychological manipulation and the techniques that are being used to do this right now. And one of them right now, of course, is the Mother Nature religion that is being put in front of people's face as, hey, it's always come back to this throughout history. It's about human sacrifice. You got to sacrifice yourself for Mother Nature. The weather gods demand that you die. Essentially, they want your blood. And it's just the modern incarnation of that. And it boggles my mind that people can't see this, but I realize the indoctrination and the propaganda runs very, very deep on this particular subject. So I hope people will take a look at that video right now and get the word out about it in whatever way you can. And I get comments and feedback from people on things like this, like, oh, James, I understand, but most of my friends and family, they still believe in the global warming cult and all of this, and so it's hard to show them your videos because you're not nice enough and whatever. This is one of those things. I have to be authentically who I am. I can't sit around and go, well, I know that you might not agree with me on this, but you're just going to have to take my word, or maybe we can have a discussion about it. No, this is important, and I want to scream in people's faces about it because it's really important. And I know that that's not going to resonate with everyone. Some people don't like to have people screaming in their faces about subjects. They'd rather have someone hold their hand on the way in. I can't do that with a subject like this. So it's just going to be what it is. But if you're one of those people who can be all diplomatic and nice and lead people into it in some way that'll make them receptive to it, great, awesome. There's your spot in the conversation. You jump in and you do it. That's what this is about. It's not about strategizing. It's about just being who you are. And if you're that type of person, great. We do need voices like that out there.
I think George Carlin, he got a gift when he was a young boy, a tape recorder, and he started tape recording little fake ads and things like that, and then he got into talk radio, and then he got into there and he realized, I don't like this industry, man, and he got into comedy and became one of the greatest comedians of all time, and it's just because somebody bought him a tape recorder in the first place, right? So everybody on your cell phone, there should be a record option. And I think maybe when I was a kid...
Or the NSA can turn it on for you.
One can only hope. So I had a tape recorder when I was a kid as well, and I would record conversation with me and my mates and things like that. And I think maybe those little toes in the shallow end of the pool or something like that prepared me for later on being chucked in the deep end when I didn't feel like I had a choice. It's like, ladies and gentlemen, I have panic attacks if I go to job interviews, including interviews for welfare. So I was like, okay, I can't work, I can't go on welfare. What do I do? Okay, I'll try and save humanity, and hopefully humanity will try and save me back. Just this naive young chap, and I was right. And that's the thing. I just did the right thing that I thought was the best thing at the time, because I was really afraid of getting enslaved and exterminated. I let my fear govern my actions. Okay, it's still on my bucket list, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Getting exterminated is like way down there on the bottom of the bucket list, but hope to experience it one day. I hope I'll meet you all in the FEMA camps, and we'll have some volleyball, and it'll be good fun. But in either case, James, you've got to leave right now, yes?
Yes, I do.
Okay, CorbettReport.com is the website, ladies and gentlemen. We'll still be here with Mark Passio for the next hour or so. Now, James, also, just before you go, social media alternatives. Facebook was down today. And I guarantee you didn't notice.
Facebook? I've heard of it. Yeah.
I only noticed because I tried to post the live stream link for the show earlier and couldn't do it until right before the show when they came back up. So that's the only reason I noticed.
They did come up before the show. Oh, thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, in either case, you were talking about social media alternatives for quite some time, James, and frankly, a lot of people do need to go and watch some of James's little social media alternatives podcasts on that.
Yeah, well, you're not going to find me on Facebook or Twitter or Insta or Snap or any of the other usual suspects. So go to CorbettReport.com and you can find links to BitChute and DTube and Steemit and Minds.com and some of the other things that I actually do use. But hey, while you're at CorbettReport.com, why not just stay there? It's a better place to get my work, right?
Yeah, indeed. All right. Thanks, James. Have yourself a lovely doctor's appointment.
I will. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, James.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
All right. Okay, Mark, just you and me now.
Okay. Let's do it.
Yeah. Because what was this? Is a continuation on from our little interview of doing the shadow work, and I had Jay Parker on just the other day as well, talking about that kind of thing. And it's interesting though, because so speaking to James and thinking about David Icke and Dan Dix and a lot of these other guys have all been sort of like very prominent in the online field for like maybe 10 years or so like that. And I think maybe that's almost how long it takes to find your feet in this game, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, maybe a little bit less than that, but it's certainly probably more than 5 years, where you really have to push it hard for that long and stay persistent. And then, you'll slowly build an audience and people who are hearing what you're really saying because they have enough of the information and they've taken enough of it in. A lot of people want in the modern world, they want the soundbite variant of everything. It's like this is what the mainstream media in Hollywood has conditioned people. Television culture has just conditioned people to, want to try to get the entirety of some type of understanding into their minds and help me to understand it in 30 seconds or less. I think it's where my work obviously turns some people off because they just don't have that attention span. And I don't try to condense it down to the lowest common denominator or the lowest IQ level. I try to really help to establish a tapestry in someone's mind, and that takes a long time to do. It takes a lot of research. It takes going through a lot of information. It takes presenting a lot of material in a stepwise progression over time. And I think the people who will take it in are the ones who are hungry enough for the truth and hungry enough for the information. And those are the kind of people I'm looking to reach personally. I've never been looking for, the people who are not really interested in going all the way into this at a deep level and then doing work on their own to try to bring this information to other people. I've never just been one to look for any followers. Like followers is something I don't have the desire to have any kind of a following. Okay, I want people who will become teachers on their own, in their own right, so that we could have more voices, like teaching people natural law, helping people to understand the world of the occult, helping people to understand the causal factors of what's going on in our lives and why we're in the situation that we're in. That's always been my goal. It's never been to attract large masses of people, but it is nice to have more people understanding your work and what you're saying. And it's always nice to see more people that are hungry for more information. Like, I'm getting many more live listeners than I ever did in the past, which is really nice to see, significantly more. I'm getting a lot more people who are taking me up on the offer for the information that was like a lot of the underpinnings of my research to do what I do now in the form of the ARC drive. And that's very heartening to see, because it shows that people really want to do the research on their own. They want to take in all of that knowledge. But going back to your original question, yes, it wasn't always like that. There were months where no one took me up on the arc drive. There were, in the early days, I was just telling someone, I would have 50 viewers of my web page, 50 unique views a month, some months, and when I was just starting out, and it slowly built and built and built. So you're not going to see instantaneous big results unless you're already a famous public figure, which is not the case for hardly anybody. You have to build up to a higher level potential. You have to start and just keep going forward with it, keep doing it. That's part of what is involved with anything. It's part of what getting better at anything is to keep doing it, and that's why it's a practice. You're never going to be the ultimate at it unless you practice constantly. You have to practice and steadily improve, and when you do that, I think that'll show in the final work and in the final effort, and people will recognize it. And that's my advice for people who want to just get started out, is to just do it and do it steadily and keep doing it. And then you'll see yourself get better, and you will see your audience that is gaining value from the work that you're putting out steadily grow.
George Carlin was asked one interview, what did he do before he figured out that one of his jokes was good enough for HBO specials that he did every year? And he goes, well, I'll take a good joke that I've made, I've written down during the year, and then I'll rewrite it. And then I'll rewrite it again. And eventually I will have rewritten it maybe 20 times before I've gotten it perfect enough, before I think it's good enough to go on the HBO show. All right. Craftsman, the word came to mind. You have to actually craft what it is you're doing. I think you have to do it in the best way that you possibly can. And I've done this with a lot of activists, actually. I think Fluoride, the Science, the Facts, and the Failure. There, we did a great video with Fluoride Free New Zealand on this, and we had so much information, so many documents, so many words, so many interviews, and all of that kind of stuff, and we managed to compress them down until it was like 7 minutes. All right, 7 minutes of this is all the arguments they use, this is all the proof that it's bad, and this is all the lies they tell you about it, and it was just bam, 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 boom, and not many people saw it. Over the years, it's gotten thousands of views and things of that nature, but I found that part of the best way of getting your stuff out there is compressing it, not taking it apart, because when you're studying the occult, for example, you do need those 3-hour and 8-hour lectures and things like that, because if you don't get that full immersion experience. Okay, I'm going to take a couple of days off and watch me some Mark Passio. I've done that. Sit down.
Yeah, it can take that long. Yeah.
Take the goddamn time. It's it's
that's part of currency. It's time and attention. That's what I've talked about as the spiritual currencies. If people aren't willing to make those investments, they're not going to get the long-term payoff, as it were. You have to put the time in, you have to put the attention in, and when you do, you'll receive the value back for that investment that you've made in the form of your resources of your being, that's some of the most valuable things that we have for ourselves is our time. That is our life. You're making an investment in life by spending your time doing something, and if it's worth if it's worth it, if you consider that what you're going to gain is really worth the effort, it's worth doing it right, and developing a deep understanding of it by putting the time in.
Yeah, and I think on top of that, it's that whole starting thing that we go like I don't want to run over this ground again per se, but when you start, you have to be desperate, I think, to a large degree. Essentially, you have to feel like there is no alternative, or at least those are the people that actually amount to something. And that takes some shock, that takes some trauma, that takes some... the word is disillusionment. It means that the illusion that you were living is no longer... is solid, all right? That's essentially it. If you haven't been disillusioned, how are you going to disillusion other people?
Right.
You know? And people think disillusioning is depressing. You're goddamn right it is. All change is fucking depressing, all right? It's angering. You try to bargain your way out of it. Then you get depressed, and maybe if you're lucky, you'll accept it and start actually doing something about it. But a lot of people don't want to get to that point of actually doing something about the shit that's fucking stressing them out. And Dr. Sam Vaknin is expert on psychopathy and narcissism, and did an interview with him, and he says, like, what's happening with people is that they're struck not in fight, not in flight, but in freeze mode, all right? Fight, flight, freeze. That's what it is. That's what anxiety is, ladies and gentlemen. Think about it.
Right.
There's an all-powerful, oppressive shadow government run by dark occultists and Satanists and dark sorcerers. Okay, so can you run from it? Can you fight it? So you freeze. You know, and it's not entirely surprising that there are billions of people living out their lives oblivious to this system because it's not pleasant. You know, it's very easy to get people to go see a Marvel movie or something like that because, oh, those are nice. Apart from the most recent one. In fact, I want to talk about that for a second. I'm not sure if you've seen it yet.
I have not.
Okay. My recommendation, don't. It's basically just a feminist propaganda movie. All right. And I was sitting there, it's like, I like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you know, got all the DVDs. Yeah. And then I was sitting there and I'm watching this stuff and I'm like, this is like slapping me in the face with its message. It's not being subtle at all. Just a freaking feminist propaganda film. Just like when Star Wars: The Last Jedi came out, and I was like, Isn't it interesting that all of these hardcore feminist, i.e., wrong ideology movies that corrupt people's favorite franchises and things like that, get a whole bunch of backlash? Who would have seen that coming?
Yeah, that was The Last Jedi was a pretty blatant one. I haven't heard too much about, the Captain Marvel one. But now that you've brought that up, that's part of it, that level of propaganda, I actually now want to see it to be able to you see what Hollywood's doing in that regard. You know, the games that they're playing.
Oh, well, they'll take your money. Don't worry.
Yeah. No, well, I won't pay. I won't pay to see it.
You could just illegally download it, you know.
Well, I want to go back. I want to go back briefly to what we were talking about like, you know, people just getting started, you know, and why they don't. You know, they're stuck in this what if mode. You know, they're stuck in this mode of, you know, well, there's all these dynamics that I have to consider, you know, from technology to, just the courage to just come right out and speak, you know, and it's really it's like anything else. It's like, you know, you have to make a decision to either, like you said, to just stop and freeze, in which case that's the place that you're going to be vulnerable at, or to keep moving. You know, it's almost like certain aspects of self-defense. If I may give a brief anecdote, a martial arts studio that I occasionally train at has a poster on their wall where the people would generally go and have a seminar, and it would be the place where you would like look behind the instructor and the way that they set up their seminars for martial arts instruction. And this poster has on it the words "what if" real big. And then, because that's always something that students of martial arts ask, well, what if this happens? What if this is done? What if my opponent does this? And the answer that comes back in the form of this poster is just the very large word printed, flow. FLOW. Okay. And that means you stay in motion. You continue down what you are doing in a way that you are prepared and ready for what is going to come next, because you have done that preparation, you have done that training. That's what the practice is for. And then you flow organically from one thing to the next, but never stopping in motion, because that's again what you just said, that freezing or that stopping is where you are vulnerable. So I think if we stay persistent on the path to to truth and to freedom, and we do not stop, you know, when we stop and we step out of the light of truth, that's where we're going to be vulnerable. But if we flow with it and we continue and we persist, that's when we're really truly staying in that slipstream where there is protection, and there is guidance, and there is ever increasing movement forward. So that's my recommendation for people, to just continue. Don't give up. Continue with it. A lot of times it's very discouraging. It's very depressing where you see people at. I get into funks like that all the time, especially living in a major metropolitan city on the East Coast of the United States that's so radically left, such as Philadelphia. It's very easy to become depressed. But you have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and say, I have to keep moving forward, and I have to step back into that flow, and I have to stay in the light of truth. And as long as you do that, the universal forces will come to your assistance in one way or another. It really does work that way. And the only way I could prove that to anybody is if you do it, and you will see what I'm saying is true. It will not be proven false, because that is the case. That is the way that it actually works. So if you do that, you will see that what I'm telling you is accurate.
And it'll be accurate in a whole bunch of different contexts. You can make up anything. Like I heard about this guy in Ireland, for instance, and he had this idea that you don't need money for anything, and he planned to go from one end of Ireland to the other and have all his expenses paid for nothing. Okay, and he got almost to the end of his journey. Wherever he went, money would turn up in his hand, or somebody would give him something, or somebody would give him a ride, or something like that. And then towards the very end of his journey, he was hungry, and he was supposed to meet up with somebody at a restaurant, but the person didn't turn up. And so he left the restaurant. He just sat on the ground and stuff like that. And one of the wait staff from the restaurant came out to him. And while this wait staff was on his way, this guy was thinking to himself, "Man, what am I doing? Am I wrong? Like, should I stop doing what I'm doing?" And this wait staff member tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Hey, did you know what meal you wanted to have?" And he goes, "Yeah. Do you know how much it was going to cost?" And he goes, "Yeah, like $17.50." And so he goes, "Okay, here's $17.50."
Wow.
Like, that's the way the universe works. It usually gives you exactly what you need right at the last minute. And my own personal experience was that I think it was my mate Jono. He offered me a gig. We were having like real financial problems and stuff like that, and I had to go and get a job, right, essentially. And I didn't like the job interview. I was very, very uncomfortable, that kind of thing, even though it was my best friend giving me the job. And then the night beforehand, I had a panic attack in bed, that kind of thing. And I had to ring him up in the middle of the night and just say, "Hey, bro, I can't come into work tomorrow. There's just no way." And that's when I turned to my listeners and I said, "Folks, I'm just going to tell you the truth. I need some money to continue what I'm doing. I don't know how that's going to happen or anything like that. Just please help." And they did. All right.
Yep.
And ever since then, whenever I've reached a moment of crisis, I ask for help and I get it.
Yeah, and again, people have to do this for themselves to find that this dynamic works exactly as you're saying. I can't tell you how many times like resources have come to me in the exact proportion needed at the exact time needed. It's amazing. It's humbling. It's very humbling when you see universal dynamics actually working that way when you are doing what you are supposed to be doing and you are doing the right thing. People will come forward. Resources will come forward. Circumstances and situations will present themselves. Opportunities will present themselves. It's like people have come forward at times when I was very depressed, almost at the verge of giving up. And, it's been like the universe has said, "I'm making these resources available to you so you can have some inspiration and some fuel to continue to go and to continue to do this." It's never more than what you need. It's never anything extravagant. It's exactly what you need to pick up the pieces and keep moving forward. That's what it gives you. It gives you, the quote unquote daily bread, from that famous prayer. It really does work like that if you're true. If you stay true, and if you're on the path that you're supposed to be on and doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Now, and it also affects relationships and stuff like that as well. For example, you'll be sitting there and you'll be like, I really, really don't like this person anymore, that kind of thing. Who else is there? And a new person will come into your life that's really, really useful for you. They help you to learn, they help you develop, they help you to grow. And then the people who were holding you back, they just disappear. That kind of thing. Your intention changes and the physical reality around you changes afterwards.
Yep. It's almost like the universe arranges for that bottleneck to be cleared, so that you can be in the situation and circumstances that you need to be to go forward. It's amazing how it works. Synchronicity is truly astounding, and I just wish more people would experience how that dynamic works by taking the courage, developing the courage to step into that flow and do the great work, because the rewards are there. And sometimes it's like, again, sometimes I get really depressed and I feel like, oh, no one's listening, and nothing is moving forward and it's not worth it. I feel like that quite a bit. I get in that funk quite a bit, and I have to remind myself of the reasons that I originally got involved in this type of work. I always try to go back to the beginning and recognize what I came out of, the situation, the unique life situation that I came out of that led me to this path. It's part of, James mentioned the dynamic earlier of, you really have to know yourself. We have to know who we are. We have to be honest with ourselves about who we are. It's part of the whole process of knowing the self. And that's the first dynamic of winning any battle, spiritual battle or physical battle. You have to know who you are. The second part is you have to know who the enemy is. And when you know the self and you know the enemy, as the saying goes, put forward by an Eastern philosopher, you will win, be victorious in 1,000 battles. But if we don't know either one, we're going to lose at least half of them. And if we don't know either, we're never going to be victorious. So part of what keeps me going, to be honest, is the negative aspect of knowing who the enemy is. Having seen it up close and personal at the level that I did, the psychopathy, the evil, it's like, I would be far more concerned and worried and quote unquote afraid of not continuing to do this work than what it means, then whatever the hardships come from doing it. I would be much more concerned about myself and the possible consequences and repercussions of not doing this work, because of what I know of who we're up against and who the enemy truly is and how evil that dynamic is and how psychopathic it is. That negative knowledge, that what people would consider something negative to know and to really deeply understand, something that, weighs heavily upon you, is actually I am able to convert that to a positive, because knowing that drives me. Knowing how sick, twisted, demented, and evil these psychopathic people who are really running things are drives me constantly, because it's like, if I stop, what does that say about who I am? And this is what I remind myself of and use as fuel. It sounds almost strange that I'm using the most negative aspects of what I know about the world to drive me, but it really does provide an impetus for continuing, because it's like, what other option or alternative is there? It goes back to what you were talking about. You do this because you recognize there is no other alternative but to do this. That's a big part of what drives what I do. And people can look at that as, oh, it's negative. That's a negative way of looking at it. But it's like, that's what is an underlying motivation for my work is I really, truly, I consider that I do know myself, but arguably just as important, if not more important, I definitively know who the enemy is. And that is something that will never allow me really to stop doing this type of work, carrying that level of knowledge of who and what we are really up against will drive me to do this for as long as I live.
Well, it's said that you should never underestimate your enemy. And when it comes to our enemies, it's impossible to overestimate how bad they are, all right? And you could not imagine, all right, the depths that they will go, and they will actually do, And you get this stress, all right, this maybe you're suffering a little bit of a stress cold there, but
I'm having a little bit of an allergic reaction to some dust that I was exposed to, unfortunately. That's why you're hearing a little bit of nasal sound. What's that?
On 9/11?
Oh, yeah. Well, then too, but
actually, I was listening
just
back
from the local environment. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just listening back to my Christopher Bolin interview from a couple of weeks ago during a watch party. And it said, like, if you're trying to get into this movement to make money, you must be the dumbest son of a bitch alive, because there's not money in truth. There is honor in truth. There's a future in truth. There is integrity in truth. How much of that is there in money? Is money honest? Has money got integrity? Has money, has money got longevity? Neither of those things. So, one time, I think I was interviewing a producer, and I asked him, how do you keep producing your shows and your network and all of that kind of stuff? And one of the things he said was interesting. It's celebrate early. No, not celebrate early. Celebrate your little victories regularly. And I thought back to myself, oh my God, there have been times when I've actually just, gotten some takeaways, gotten a DVD and just watched them on the couch with my wife just to celebrate whatever it was, And I think a lot of the time we forget that because we're on the frontline soldiers aren't meant to stay on the front line. They're meant to come back, they're meant to rotate home. They're meant to heal up, that kind of thing. Nobody can stay in enemy territory the whole goddamn time.
Sure.
And a lot of these stresses and things like that, I think back when I was smoking cigarettes a couple of months ago, I smoke when I'm stressed, essentially. So I may smoke at some point again, but just not at the moment. I'm actually feeling quite happy with myself. I'd smoke a ciggy when I was really feeling stressed, and I'd go, where are you? I'm right here. What time is it? It's right now. What are you doing? I'm having a ciggy. Is there anything you actually need to be stressed about then? No, there isn't. Okay, and that was grounding myself in the present moment, because a lot of the things that are stressing us out haven't happened yet, have happened in the past, or ain't going to happen immediately, and that kind of thing. So if you root yourself in that moment, where am I? What am I doing? What's actually happening? Suddenly the stress, it's gone.
Right.
And we have a question.
And that is true present moment awareness.
We have a question in here for Mark. A popular YouTube channel, Edge of Wonder, talks about the occult, but are missing the natural law principles. Try to get on their show. Well, we'll see if we can. Edge of Wonder. You never heard of it?
I'm not familiar with it, but what I would say regarding that is anyone who has delved into the occult and has not encountered the entire basis of natural law and what it really means and how it works in our lives has not explored the occult deeply enough. And they haven't come to what I would consider the most deeply occulted knowledge in our world, which is the knowledge of how natural law, cosmic moral law actually functions in our lives to through our free will behavior to bring us the consequences and the result, the manifested reality that we actually then experience. If people have not encountered natural law in their journey or search into the occult world and occult knowledge, they haven't gone deeply enough in that search.
And I think that's probably why your work, I think, has probably been so instrumental to so many people, including myself, is I've gone out and I've learned all those natural law principles you talk about, but I didn't know they had names. I didn't know they had definitions and things like that. Like, you go out and you understand a general way of life, but then you see a Mark Passio presentation and you go, oh, that general rule of life I learned, it's actually got a name, it's actually got a category, it's actually got a definition. How interesting. And that's why it's the one truth, because everybody can come to it, I think, sure. From any goddamn direction. But of course, what you've done is sort of very, very different from what people ordinarily do, which is bumble along accidentally along and get fucked up by certain things and then learn certain principles and things like that. You've actually gone into the Hermetic principles and ancient knowledge and really just sort of translated it for people. And I think that's largely what our work is being translators, more or less. Here's an incredibly complex ancient language. This is what it means.
Right. And that is what we do. We help to bring this knowledge down to the everyday man. And that's what it's meant for. It's not, I feel it is meant to be distributed in an egalitarian fashion for the every person to understand. I think if we hold it too tightly to our chest and try to say it's only for an elect or an elite, we're going to get into the same situation that created the current human condition of slavery, because that's always done through ignorance. If we put it out there in a way that other people can understand it, they'll begin to accept it and research it and learn and understand it on their own terms, and that's what the goal is here, to spark that kind of an interest, so that they stop their intellectual laziness and are inspired to want to take this knowledge in for themselves. It's like that old adage, you could lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink. But a lot of people have never been led to the water. They've never been shown the stream. They've never been shown this information. So how many more people are developing a personal interest in these topics because it has been shown to them in a way, in a format that they can understand? It's not this lofty thing. It doesn't have to be this overly intellectualized, lofty thing with super complex language. We can just put it in a form that people can, visually, see it, grasp it, understand it, and then apply it in their lives and understand how it works. And that's my goal. I try to apply my personal aesthetics. I used to be a graphic designer in the past, so I try to do my best in putting good, appropriate visuals to the information that I put forward, and I try to make it aesthetically attractive. It's something that I try to tailor and hone and spend some time doing, because I think that matters. I think how we present the information insofar as how detailed it is, how orderly the information is structured, applying a nice aesthetic to it, so it's good to look at, and people want to look at it more. These are all factors that I take into consideration when I do my work, and it's all about doing that tailoring, that fine tuning, that craftsmanship that you spoke about, to spark people's interest in it. And that's what we need. We need a spiritual and occult revival in this world, so that people understand that this is our birthright. To understand the knowledge of natural law is the human birthright, and it's actually we have been not only held back from it, it's not only been hidden in the past, but we have been dissuaded from looking into it, and we're told, oh, this isn't important, or it isn't our birthright, and nothing could be further from the truth. And I'm seeing the very beginnings of an inkling of some higher level desire to take this knowledge in, with the kind of interest I'm seeing in this information in recent times. It's a little bit encouraging to me that more people are seeming to be standing up and paying attention, sitting up in their chairs and paying attention, and that they seem to want this information a little bit more than when I first started.
Yeah, well, I think it's also word of mouth. If somebody goes to you, hey, I watched this presentation by Mark Passio and I suddenly understand what I am and my nature in relation to the universe and its holographic fractal nature, and they go, the fuck are you talking about? But they'll remember the Mark Passio.
Yeah, see, the soundbite doesn't work. You know what I mean?
Well, it's just like that Bill Hicks thing. Today, a young man on acid realized that all matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration, and that we are the imagination of ourselves. Life is only a dream, and there is no such thing as death. Here's Tom with the weather.
He was brilliant.
And now there was one more statement from the thing regarding that YouTube channel I said before. They were spreading misinfo on As Above, So Below, saying it's from Satanism. Please look into their channel and help them out. That's from All Is Mind.
Yeah. Well, I could potentially do that, or you could just, let them know that there is more to learn and discover, because it's a very unidimensional way of looking at things. I would maybe recommend some of the Hermetic texts to them, especially the Kybalion, and tell them that there is another side to that perspective and viewpoint if they go a little bit deeper into the work. That would be my advice to the people who are at that level of their understanding of occultism. That's what I would say to them personally.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this before about, levels and levels and levels and levels. And I think that's why Freemasonry was really chucked into like 33rd degrees and things like that. So you can just go to this person, okay, what do you know? Oh, I'm 33rd degree. Oh, okay, you know this much. And
Yeah, I mean it's a ever expanding realm, and there's really no end to it. You climb to the mountaintop here, and there's another mountain on the other side, and you get up there, and it just expands to another vista and taller peaks, So it's possible to get lost in that too. We have to make sure we don't get lost in just that search, where we understand that we are supposed to be the disseminators of what we know as well. We're here to influence and encourage other people who haven't come into contact and don't necessarily know as much as we do, and to help them and raise them up and pull them up to the level that we are at. And they have to want to do that work as well. It's like they have to have that desire to come up there. It's like you can't let someone pull you off the cliff that you just climbed up to the top of. You're up on that plateau ready to move to the next one. They're hanging there, and if you're going to pull them up, you have to make sure they don't pull you down and let you go over the cliff. They have to have a desire to come up, so they have to use their energy to help you pull them up as well. So that's part of what discourages me, is when I see people that they just want to stay right where they're at, and they're bucking the universal flow of consciousness for everybody when they do that. It's like that form of spiritual laziness can be upsetting to me, because it's like the more ignorance that there is, that's enslaving other people. That's keeping us right where we're at in the condition of slavery that we're in, where it doesn't take a lot of effort really to start to take this information in. Like you were saying earlier, you could pull on just about any thread, and you'll get to that center point. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of entry points that you can come into this knowledge from, and it's like all you have to do is develop a deep interest to pull on any one of those threads, or to follow any one of those paths into the center, and then all of the other information that comprises that whole will be available unto you from that point, once you go deeply enough into any one of those areas of interest. That's why I get discouraged sometimes, because I see how much information and knowledge will lead people into a deeper understanding. And I think, to stay ignorant, how hard are they working not to go into any one of those avenues of pursuit or of interest, and to work it and develop it and go deeper into it? You have to, it's almost like in the modern world, with as much information is out there on all of these types of topics, and on, the whole state of human freedom in general, it's almost like you have to work hard to stay ignorant and to not go down that path of real spirituality and real truth seeking, to get to the understanding that many of us have arrived at about what's really going on. And that's what concerns me, is like, how hard do so many of these people work at just willfully refusing to look at any in point, so to speak, to that heart of truth that you will eventually get to if you take that path down any one of those inroads. It's arguably, I would say that it's harder to ignore it than it is to take in that knowledge and transform your consciousness. That's actually an easier work to do than it is to stay at that level of deep, willful ignorance.
the sense of frustration in other people not living their lives as you understand that they should. And when I say that, there's a lot of people that go, oh, you're telling people how to live their lives or anything like that. Okay, here's the thing. I know how to live my life, and I've got a track record of actually not being that bad at it. And there's a whole bunch of people out there who ain't living their lives. They're living slave jobs and things like that, and that are at a lower level of consciousness, and I'm just trying to help. Not because I want to control them, because I want them to control themselves. Because if people don't control themselves, that means somebody else who maybe doesn't have a conscience will be in control of them, and they can often use those people as pawns and puppets and dogs to go after people like me.
And to violate their rights and freedoms. And see, that's what ignorance makes possible. Ignorance makes it possible to turn other people toward evil and its goals. This is part of the theme that I talked about in my most recent podcast just this past Sunday. And it's like, that's why people have to understand it's our shared responsibility to educate the masses of people. That's what the great work is to do. And it isn't that we're trying to tell them how to live every aspect of their lives. It's that we're explaining that if you have to get on the same page about certain things that aren't really our, quote, right to ignore, because if you ignore them, then you don't understand what are violations of other people's rights and violations of their lives and of their freedom, which we don't have any right to perform upon anyone. Because that's not our property. Other people's lives, rights, and freedoms aren't our property, so we can't violate that, and that's what we're talking about here, that we need to help everybody to get on the same page about rights, about freedom, I think that does not encompass the entirety of life or how one can live their life. So there's so many infinite possibilities over how one can possibly live. The natural law actually takes a small fraction of that and says, don't do these few things because these are violations against other people's rights, lives, and property. So since you don't want those things to be violated for yourself, don't do these things. And in doing those things, violate, don't violate other people's lives, rights, and property. It's actually so simple. It's crazy how simple it actually is. But yet people obfuscate truth. They obfuscate what right and wrong are, and they're dissuaded from ever looking into it, or they're told it's all relative. None of it matters. It's all religious. I hear all of these things from many people, and it's none of those things. It's utterly important to how all of us live our lives and how all of us experience life on this planet. It is not religious belief at all. I always talk about the dangers of religion, actually. I'm about the most anti-religion person that there is, because this has nothing to do with religious belief. This is how laws of nature function. And this is about what real, objective right and wrong are, because rights are actions that don't initiate harm to other beings, whereas wrongs do. So just don't cause harm. Cause the least amount of harm that you possibly utterly can in life. That's what our intent and goal should ultimately be. Not to violate other living beings, just to live our lives in peace, and we would expect others to allow us to do the same. So like I said, the simplicity of it is elegant. And I find that that's where a lot of real deep truths lie. There's simplicity, there's elegance in their simplicity. And it's just, don't do harm, don't steal, don't take that which is not yours, because that's what all forms of harm are, is stealing something, whether in the form, like I said, in the form of rights, life, or property. And we don't want that done to us, so don't do it to other people. I mean, this is the negative variant of the golden rule. Don't treat others in ways that you don't want to be treated. The golden rule could be worded in the apophatic or in the negative sense, just like that. And when we understand it as such, what we really have a right to do versus what we don't have a wrong to do should become very clear unto us if we're being honest with ourselves.
There's a couple of things came to mind while you were saying that. One's the Dunning-Kruger effect, the concept of cognitive dissonance, or as I'd like to call it, we've become cognitive dissidents. We're thinking about our dissidentism. and that people are programmable. All right, now I want to elaborate on that Dunning-Kruger effect. So 1999, there was a study and they got a whole bunch of people who were really, really high up in the scientific field to take a test on all these science questions. And they had another group of people who knew nothing about science to do that same group of questions. Now, they'd answer the questions, and after each question, they would ask themselves how high they would rank their confidence that their answer is correct. Now, when the results came back, it turns out that the people who actually did know a lot didn't know as much as they thought they did. And the people who knew virtually nothing thought they knew a lot more than they actually did. All right?
Right.
So what that means is we all think we know more than we actually do. Everybody, no matter what your level of knowledge is, you think you're a lot more intelligent than you are. and I think that's quite funny because that explains almost every single argument I've ever had that didn't go anywhere. Because the person across from me didn't understand as I did that I don't know everything. Okay? And I think there was a naturopath who told me this joke one time. What's the difference between a medical doctor and a god? A god realizes that they're not a medical doctor.
That's awesome.
And so,
see the aspect of the Dunning-Kruger effect that's really it's almost worse than what we think is, like you said, everybody tends to think that they are actually more intelligent than they actually are, but the least intelligent among the entire group, that effect is infinitely more pronounced, where they will think that they know way more in many cases. Now, not in all cases, but in many. And the opposite dynamic of it is that the most intelligent often ascribe a level of intelligence in being able to understand what they understand to the average individual as well. So they tend to think that other people are more intelligent than they actually are. That's another dynamic of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you'll have people that understand a very great deal about a particular topic, and they think other people are not only somewhat knowledgeable on that topic when they may be completely non-knowledgeable on it at all, but they attribute that they have an ability to get to that level of knowledge the same as kind of how they arrived at it. And it's not necessarily the case. I mean, many people will struggle, have learning disabilities, just not have the mental capacity inherently to grasp hard to grasp concepts and topics. So it's a very interesting study and dynamic of how human intelligence functions and how human perception works when it comes to intelligence.
Yeah, and I think the key there is be humble.
Right.
There's always something you don't know. You can always learn, and I think maybe that's the crux of the issue, is that people believe that they don't have to learn anymore once they get beyond a certain point, and right. That's stagnation. That's death. That's intellectual dishonesty. I think that's religion, isn't sure. it? Isn't it? I know all the truths. I'm going to heaven. Right. You're going to hell. It's absolutist.
Yeah, and there's always more to learn and always places to improve in our lives. There's always different avenues for learning and growth. There's no such thing as staying still. Like you said, staying still is stagnation and ultimately death.
Yeah, it's entropy, slow entropy. And for those of you in the listening audience who aren't following the chat, if you do enter in the super chat, you can ask questions of either myself or Mark while we're still here. Now, I wanted to get into this element with... Recently, there's been a lot of flat Earth stuff, a lot of QAnon stuff, a lot of Trump stuff, and I was just like, if I were a ruthless criminal sociopathic scumbag that knew psychology and knew how to manipulate, knew how to co-opt and destroy genuine movements, and have been doing so for centuries, those are the things that I would create.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing. You watch the entire truth movement just essentially implode into infighting. Like that, I've never seen anything like it.
And psyops like this are just put out to create that infighting, and they're also put out to disinfo and discredit legitimate research into the fields of, the control, the areas of control conspiracy, mind control, the occult, etc. They want people to associate that type of study with the baseless conjecture that a lot of people are putting forward with certain conspiracy theories, instead of looking at actual conspiracy fact and fact of how the control system really does work in our lives. They're inventing these psyops to try to have legitimate researchers sprinkle all of that in with legitimate topics of discussion and truth, and in doing so discredit those legitimate areas of research, those avenues of research that people should understand. So when people are hearing things like, well, you really have to be concerned about the types of damage vaccines can do to young children, and how vaccine damage and autism are completely on the rise, and these are totally causally connected, and then you'll hear people say, oh, you believe that? What are you, a flat earther too? Because that's how this psyop works. It's a guilt by association psyop. They want people to latch on to that poison pill and believe it, and then make that a big part of their lives, so that they won't be taken seriously as a researcher in other legitimate areas. It's very insidious.
Well, and if you do believe in these things, don't feel insulted or anything like that, because if you hadn't had perhaps the experience that I'd had or Mark had had with exactly these type of things coming up again and again, year after year, bit by bit, it's always a different thing or whatever. This narcissist trauma counselor once said something like this: when a patient comes into my office and they tell me a whole bunch of things about their abuse that they've suffered at the hands of their narcissistic partner, I can sort of read a trail sort of thing, and I can predict and be completely unsurprised by all of these things that these people are saying, because after a while you get an instinct. You become kind of like a hunter for truth, and all these red flags start coming up, and you're like, okay, no, there's something very, very fishy here. I'm not going to jump on this bandwagon. And, I don't. And as a direct result, I don't get the big deals. I don't get the big money and all of that kind of stuff. And just remember, ladies and gentlemen, it's called selling out for a reason. All right? Because when you're selling something, you get what in return? Money. Okay? Right here, we're not selling you anything. We're just giving it to you. Free samples, free samples of truth. Here you go. Swallow them. They're quite bitter.
If that worthless fiat paper that is worth less than the paper it's printed on, if that's your system of value, if that is what you live your life to acquire, it's like, and you would sell out the truth and the community of people who really want genuine freedom to just accumulate more of that worthless nonsense. What does that say about that person as a human being, about what their real internal value system in their own mind and heart are? It's like the lowest of the low, and too many people fall for that bait. That's why I've challenged. People really want to believe in flat Earth and try to research it as a legitimate, a pursuit of knowledge. Demonetize all of your YouTube channel. All of your YouTube channels dedicated to the topic, because it's such a push button issue and a clickbait topic. Then let's see how serious you are about it. Make what you're doing and do that just on what people are willing to contribute to that effort, because of how much real value it brings to their life. I've never monetized my YouTube channel. I've never put any paid advertisements on my website. I work solely through donations, and that's been able to sustain what I do and keep me moving forward. I challenge the flat Earth community to do that. I have for a long time, and that's why I get a lot of flack from them still. And as you said, Max Egan is being outright digitally harassed by them. I've encountered similar things just because I say that it's not true in reality, in point of fact. And I have looked into it overwhelmingly for a long time, because I don't take anything lightly. I look into things that are, And if I find that my former viewpoint is proven wrong, legitimately through legitimate methods, and I can say yes unequivocally that is what is really going on, then I will I will no longer hold on to my previous worldview. I am not rigid in that sense. If new information is encountered and it proves what I previously thought wrong, I will change my take on something. That is not the case when it comes to the whole flat Earth so-called research. It is very many piled up misconceptions of how real dynamics of motion work and real geometry works, et cetera, and real cosmology works, unfortunately. And it's a sad thing to me. I don't want the harassment is what makes me not like the way these people operate. We could have a discussion without having to harass each other.
Yeah.
That's what's going to make me behave like a caged animal, and you won't like that result. So I don't like their tactics and behavior personally. Telling me what I must think and do. I've looked at it more. Just not to even belabor this topic, but I've looked at it more than I'm even comfortable saying publicly. I'm almost embarrassed by how much I've looked into it, and no part of it stands upon any other part. It all every single solitary aspect of the model falls completely apart when it's subjected to any rigorous investigation from a true scientific point of view, as far as I'm concerned. So people who say I haven't looked into it, you don't know what you're talking about. I've probably looked into it more than you have.
Now we have another super chat in from Big Chungus. Government is slavery. Great work, guys. Keep spreading love and truth. My question, can you please hit a dab on all those haters in the live chat? And I have. Well, see, that was the thing as well, because, while we're talking about this topic, you got people kind of going ballistic in the chat room, and they're illustrating exactly what we're saying, is that Sure. If you've got a truth that people aren't willing to accept, aren't willing to look at the evidence and things like that, it does very little good to call them names and attack them and harass them and so on and so forth. If anything, you're just going to make an enemy out of them. Now, the thing is, if you're a narcissist, a sadist, or a psychopath, that's what you want. You want attention, negative, positive, doesn't matter, as long as it's attention. And so, ladies and gentlemen, go to Psychology Today and Google trolling, all right? And you'll come up with this article that says trolls are narcissists, sadists, and psychopaths, right? And you go into this realization, okay, it reminded me of something Christopher Bolin said on the interview, and I asked him, how do you tell somebody who's a 9/11 shill, like somebody who's spreading full-on disinfo? And he says, well, they don't try to spread info. What they try to do is discredit and attack people who are.
That's right.
And I was like, whoa.
And that's why, for a moment, I would just like to say to my friend Max Egan, Max, don't let these trolls get you down, man. Kick them back under the bridge and just keep moving forward. You're too important to this whole community and movement to let them get to you. They were getting to me for a little while, and I kind of blew up on the net about it, and kind of like that was like a cathartic experience. I really needed to get it off my chest because you have no idea how much digital harassment I went through about this topic, and that's not going to convert anybody to their side. Like, I don't email bomb people. I don't, send people nasty emails talking about what's going on with human rights or police or anything like that. I put it out on the air in my original content that I create. I put it out over the airwaves, and I hope to reach people's eyes and ears and reach their minds and heart. Just stick with doing it that way. You don't need to target any people and try to make their lives miserable. You're not winning any points. You're certainly not winning any converts to your skewed worldview. So, if you that's what you think, put videos out. You're free to do that. That's what you can use your talent and create content to do if you so choose. That's your freedom and right to do so. Just don't tell other people what they must subscribe to because you've come to the conclusion that you've come to. There is a truth about it, just like there is a truth about human freedom and rights, etc. In this instance, not everybody necessarily must agree, because human freedom and slavery are not what is on the line. That's not, what is going to happen, whether the earth is round, flat, cubical, rhomboidal, a Mobius strip, or whatever other shape you could envision. Okay. However, when it does come to human rights and freedom, if we don't understand that the truth of that, we're going to be going down a very, very seriously negative path that leads to slavery and ultimately to extinction. The shape of any given place is not going to have those repercussions, and is not going to have those consequences. Regardless of what the shape of our place that we are living in and or on, there is still slavery taking place on it, and that is infinitely more important than its shape.
I'm thinking about that as well, like how many more important things are. But then again, and I'm just playing devil's advocate there, that's exactly what everybody says. Oh, that's not important to talk about vaccines, talk about climate change or any stuff like that. And then you look into it and you go, okay, well, let's say that the methodology of disinformation is to give people 90% truth so that they'll believe the 10% of lies you're selling, which manipulate and distort the actual message of the truth. So I think somebody had me on their show one time and they go, so Vinny, just give us your opinion here. Is the earth flat or is it round? And I go, it's neither. It's a holographic fractal representation of collective consciousness co-creating itself. All right?
How could it be anything else?
It can't. That was my point. It's like it's the only thing that answers all the questions we have. Oh, it's a holographic fractal representation of collective consciousness co-creating itself. Of course, it's the only thing that really makes sense to me at this point.
That's what the whole universe is. Yeah, that's right.
And we've got another question in here. Vinny, what do you think about using cannabis hemp as our main resource when everyone decides to come together and reject the beast system? Well, that actually came up on a legalized Cannabis Party podcast that we did, and the thought occurred to me right in the middle of the podcast. Oh my God, what if cannabis was a currency? And before people shoot me down on that, if you smoke weed, tell me right now that you've never used it as a currency.
It's not.
Yeah. And
the
that
question
was the thing.
isn't what cannabis/hemp can do. It's what it can't do. That's what I've always said. That's what a miraculous plant this is. That it's like I would be surprised of anything that it cannot do. That's what we have to understand it to be. It is literally a miracle plant, and the fact that it is as suppressed as it is an utter crime against humanity, as far as I'm concerned.
That's another thing as well, is in New Zealand, they're kicking the cannabis down the road, right? It's like, oh, everybody else is legalizing, but let's just do a few more years. Let's have a referendum. Yeah. Let's have another election. Let's have some new bills to be put in and stuff like that. And it's just delay tactics, everything we've seen. I mean, it'll be like the frickin' JFK documents or something like that. They'll be declassified in 50 years. Oh, wait, no, we're not going to declassify them now, actually. Presidential edict. Just get you to stand down and wait around, and that's the kind of thing. And people don't take the moral stand on this, okay? And when I say about cannabis and a moral stand, okay, I have seen my elders in extraordinary pain. I have handed them a joint, and their pain went the fuck away. Somebody is making the decision out there that those people should perpetually be in pain.
That's right.
End of fucking story.
I mean, imagine how many children are helped when they have seizure conditions, or even worse, cancer, and there are people who would say, because this is scheduled against the law, that children should suffer. Imagine what kind of a heartless beast does someone have to be to say they want to see children suffering just because they want their prison system in place, and they want this whole system of the war on drugs to continue, which has been a farce since day one. I mean, you have to be a real piece of immoral trash to want to see people suffer in the ways that they're suffering without this medication, because it is certainly a true, genuine, natural medicine that the universe has provided. That's what it really is, and we're really we're symbionts with this plant. Actually, that's how deep it goes. It's actually in our DNA, and we have cannabinoid receptors in great quantities in our brain, and it's something that we should really even be using as a nutrient. I mean, to juice the cannabis bud and drink the juice is one of the most curative things that you can do with the can. It's one of the most medicinal uses that how you can use it. You juice it with other fresh vegetables, carrots, celery, etc. I mean, cannabis juice is one of the most healing things for the body to be taken internally. So, it's a food, it's a nutrient, it's a medicine. It reduces pain and inflammation. It helps with anxiety. There's no end to what it does. Then you look at the industrial uses of it, and you can go even on more and more. You can make things that replace plastic, replace concrete, replace glass. I mean, it's utterly and completely amazing. And for people who haven't looked into it or studied it, they should look into it to understand really all of its uses and how miraculous it really is, and how much of a crime it is to keep it in the status that it is in many places, in most places.
Yeah, keeping cannabis illegal is a crime. Next question in from Eamon Puedama. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I think the occult is rooted in idealism, the philosophy that all is mind. Does Mark think philosophical arguments against materialism are important?
Well, I reject the materialist paradigm of the primacy of matter, which doesn't take consciousness into consideration. I would say it's certainly not oversimplification or idealism. I consider it realism. I consider it looking at reality as it actually is, and I consider it science that has been held back from us. It isn't that the occult is idealistic or non-scientific. It is actually looking at how things work at a fundamental level of source. And it is a science. Occultism is not religion. It is not a hearsay or conjecture. It is hidden science. That's literally what it is. And it's things that can be established and understood from the same methodologies that we use in science, which is observation, data gathering, hypothesizing about it, doing experimentation regarding a lot of the projected ways that it may work, to be able to understand how it actually does function, and then publishing your results and helping other people to understand it. The methodology for the understanding of occult science is no different than the traditional scientific methodology. So when we look into the trivium and the quadrivium, and we realize the trivium is the methodology of truth discovery, and the quadrivium is the quantification aspects of that truth discovery methodology, we can use those, we can apply those just like we do the scientific method to come to the truth about occult principles. The difference is traditional physical sciences have been revealed unto the world, whereas the occult sciences have been kept hidden. That's really the only difference between the two. The laws that are really governed by the occult principles are physical laws. Okay, because when behaviors come through into the physical domain, that's where the consequences are brought into the result. The result is brought through those consequences. So higher level spiritual laws and moral laws are ultimately physical laws at the base level. It all is ultimately physical laws because they all operate in the 3D domain. It's just the causal nature of where these laws come from a higher place than the 3D domain. No scientist in the world can answer the question, where did gravity come from? Okay, you can ask them that all day. Okay, they know about the law of gravity from the effects of gravitation. Okay, but as to the actual essence and nature of the force, they cannot really ultimately tell you what it is, nor can they tell you what put it into effect. And the same is true for other occult laws, particularly natural law, which governs the consequences of free will behavioral choices.
And speaking of that, on the concept of free will, there's nowhere to run, you can't freeze and everything like that. At what point do people decide to stand and fight? And
That's right.
I think I was down in Wellington one time hanging out with my listener Steve, And we talked about, I told them the definition of valor. All right, now valor's not like courage. All right, courage is a fleeting sensation that comes into you and you do something and it evaporates the second the need for it is no longer there. That's courage and bravery. Valor is when you see a threat so large and so irresistible that your failure or your death is not only likely, it is certain.
Right.
And you stand your ground and you fight anyway.
And that's right. That's right. And that's why I love that word. I love the entire concept of valor, because it's like it doesn't make a difference what happens to me. You know, it's doing the right thing because you recognize it as the right thing. And, consequences to myself in the 3D world be damned. I answer to a higher force than that. You know, that's what happens here in flesh and blood is certainly not as important to me as what happens at the soul level. And that's why there is no real other option than to stand our ground and to move forward and be persistent in this spiritual battle that we are all in.
Now, the concept of battle as well, you get battle weariness, you get, what is it? You get desensitized. This is another thing that's happening to society as well. We're all at each other's throats, and I think we're getting desensitized to it to the point where... I don't know, maybe those who are too sensitive to it don't participate in discussions full stop anymore. And those who are nasty, who want the conversations to go into a nasty little negative way, they're the overwhelming participants, but they're up against people like you or I who don't back down, but we don't participate in no-win scenarios either. Like, for example, this guy's trolling me, blocking the fucking scum is gone. You know, it's very simple.
Right.
But a lot of the times, you know, you're dealing with this on a long, ongoing basis, you know, that kind of thing. And to be honest, ladies and gentlemen, I need to smoke weed and watch a movie or play a video game on occasion just to get over the shit that you give me, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry. You know,
we all have our distraction methods, you know, and that's actually healthy, because if you go too much toward imbalance, always doing just the same one thing, that can become unhealthy. You know, we can always push ourselves too hard. You know, and that's why you do have to have, worldly pursuits that you find a little bit of joy in, to take your attention focus away from the work for a little bit. It's always going to be there, you know. I think it'll be there, you know, at least for the duration of our lifetimes, and future generations. Hopefully we will get more people to become interested and take on this work and, move humanity forward toward greater freedom instead of a shutdown of our freedom and our rights. I don't think that future is set in stone in either direction. I think it's still a process of transformation. It's still something that is open-ended and can go either way. And that's why I continue. If I thought it was set in stone either way, I probably wouldn't say a word, but it's still in flux. You know, it's still a dynamic that is capable of being changed one way or another. And that's why we have to get involved if we want to see a change for the positive. And we have to all bring our contributions to the table in that one great work.
Yeah, it's we do it for flux sake.
Yes.
Another question from Iman Podama.
Sure.
Wants to know your definition of idealism, and have you looked up Bernardo Kastrup?
I'm not familiar. Idealism, I guess, would be, you know, the maximum positive outcome or aspect of anything, a way of looking at something that is, pure and of maximum positivity. That's why I don't consider myself an idealist, because I very much look at the negative aspects involved in everything. Someone may disagree with that my way of looking at idealism or that definition. But, I certainly consider myself a realist and not an idealist by any sense or stretch of the imagination. I don't think people who have listened to a whole lot of my work would consider me an idealist either. They I think see the pragmatism in what I talk about, and they see that I'm very much a realist, and that I could be very much a negativist, as a matter of fact, when it comes to what I see about the about human behavior in our times. So certainly idealism is not something that I push or propagate. I think principles don't really have to do with idealism or positivity, negativity. They're just truth. They're just what is. A principle is a truth that will lead to freedom. That's ultimately what real principles, and that's what we should really value. That's why we have to make principles our values. We have to align them, especially principles that lead to truth and freedom, in our lives, and expanded consciousness. When we make those the essence of what we care about, that's what will manifest. What manifests is what we care about and think about most of the time. And then you just think about that. What's your average everyday person most places in the world just think about and care about all the time? It's just survival and me, and more for the self, and worry over scarcity, over money, over resources, it's like all of that selfishness is going to lead us down a negative pathway. When we make real principles our value system of truth, courage, right action, positive emotional qualities, and concern for others, service to others and to the truth, freedom. When we make these our value system, then we're moving in a direction that moves humanity forward in consciousness and, in the positive direction. That's not idealism. That's the way the dynamic laws of nature actually work to bring us the result and to bring us the experiences. In that sense, the universe is like a mirror, mirroring our mindset and worldview back to us. And if we have a worldview that is based in service to truth and creation, and ultimately trying to move the world in a direction of ever increasing freedom, that's what will manifest. And the problem is, the reason it's not manifesting is most people don't have that as their value system. They have a whole value system that is just based in selfishness, accumulation of wealth, comfort, etc. And those aren't the values that are going to push humanity forward. So regardless of whether someone agrees with the definition that I put forward of idealism, I just consider myself a pragmatist and realist when it comes to what actually creates the manifested reality that we all together experience as a shared state. And I feel that I have a grasp and an understanding of the actual laws that help to determine that reality based upon the behaviors that we put forward into the universe. And like I said, the universe acts like a mirror in that respect, and it mirrors back to us what we have put out into it, and then we have to live in that space. We have to live in that manifested condition.
This reminds me of a conversation I was having with a radio producer once, and he was saying that essentially if you've got a team of people, they all more or less have to be of the same wavelength. Otherwise, if you've got even one person in an organization who ain't on board, they're going to slow everybody else down in a very noticeable and painful fashion.
Oh, Vinny, it was like that. This is what I had to try to really do to put an effective team together for the production team. And I'm very happy that I've gotten people that are all pretty much on the same page and understand and share a very similar worldview and value system, and really put a lot of effort forward to help with the work. And I feel like very fortunate and blessed in that regard, because that's absolutely right. If you have even someone who is operating at a completely opposite or negative wavelength, it will act as an interference pattern in the goals that you are trying to create, and it will slow it down, like someone trying to push water with a large paddle in the opposite direction of the flow.
Or like somebody trying to talk over each other when they, like that kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
if you have two people talking over each other, neither of them get heard, that kind of thing, and then you have to find that dynamic. It's like, okay, I like to talk. I like the sound of my own voice, and I'm not too afraid to admit that, because I'm really good at what I do, and I understand that, and I understand it's objective, and I've had so many people confirm this to me. But that does not mean I have the best ideas all the time. That does not mean there is no time for me to shut up and listen to what somebody's saying. Right. And those are the people you want on your team, people who know the time and the place. All right. I think
that's why I like hearing from the audience and taking calls. It's like it's good to hear other perspectives and to listen to where people are at and what they have to bring to the table. And it's something that I have valued since day one of What on Earth is Happening. And I think I have some of the greatest callers in all of talk radio on my show. I'm sure you get a lot of great callers in when you take calls. It's just something that I've really, it's a dynamic I've enjoyed and like participating in and hearing from the listening audience. And I think they always bring a unique and fresh perspective to the table.
Now, we also have another comment from the person who donated before to ask that question about idealism. And he says that the occult is grounded in idealism. Look up idealism and it tells you all is mind.
Well, that's only one aspect of that. The way that someone is looking at that ideology. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are equivalents. Okay, so there could be an aspect that they share, but it doesn't mean that they are the same thing. Again, the aspect of mentalism, the principle of mentalism is only one aspect of the occult. It's a very important one, but it is only one aspect, where there are many, many, many others. There's an infinite, a plethora of topics that you can look into regarding occultism and how it works and what it has to teach us about ourselves and our world. So I feel that that's somewhat of an oversimplification of trying to equate two things that simply share a dynamic in common. Yeah. Personally.
In fact, that reminds me, I was doing a video about New Zealand Freemasonry and breaking down this news piece and stuff like that. And one thing that I forgot during it, how the G in the middle of the Freemason sign means a lot of different things once you go up to certain levels and things like that. I didn't know that at the time that I was making that video, and then I watched it back today or yesterday I think it was, and I was like, because I think it was directly after watching a presentation that you made where we defined the G's and all the different meanings of them and that kind of thing, and I was just like, wow, there's always deeper meaning to everything, and I love being wrong, because it means that I have a choice about whether or not to continue being wrong or to stop being honest.
That is the choice. And there's very multi-dimensional aspects to things that we consider in many cases are unidimensional. We have to set down unidimensional thinking and realize that there's always a different perspective to look at something from. Some things are absolute, no question about that. But there are very multifaceted aspects from which we can look at any given dynamic. So I try not to oversimplify things or just idealize them. I try to help people to see all different aspects of them. At least that's what I endeavor to do. And I think most people would say that I've done a pretty good job at doing that and helping them to see things from many different perspectives.
This concept of looking at things from many different perspectives, I started off in cannabis activism. All right, now it's interesting, you go into cannabis activism, and then all of a sudden you go into 9/11, then you go into vaccines, then you go into global warming and all of these other things, and you realize you build up in this giant repertoire of knowledge of reality, right? And you may have had conversations with people, Mark, where they'll say something and the blood drains from your face because you realize that this person has such a tenuous grip on reality that you're unwilling to stay around for the several years it's going to take them to wake the fuck up, even if they were trying.
Right.
Like they're not there. They're not even initiates, and they're a waste of time. And it seems to me
some of the
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. So some of the dark occultists refer to them as the unbegun. I've talked about that word for them in my work. It means that they haven't started. They haven't even set one foot on the path or even attempted to go any deeper into knowledge of self or of creation. And it's actually an accurate term. The uninitiated, the unbegun, those who have not started. And the thing that is disconcerting to me about that is not that they're called that by dark occultists, but that it is possible for them to stay in that state for the length of time that they often do. And many people will die in that state. I often wonder, like, how many lifetimes do certain souls maybe stay in that hardened, calcified state of not wanting to advance or move forward? And it's like, it's almost amazing to me that the human mind and soul can be worked into that negative of a condition. It's like it's almost something I wouldn't have thought possible. It's a testimony that we should never underestimate the enemy that we are up against and the layers and levels of manipulation that they are capable of performing, and the seemingly impossible states that they are capable of working the human mind into, because they are that psychopathic, and they have that ability to manipulate because of what they know about how the mind works. So that's what's overwhelmingly disconcerting to me at times, that people can not only be worked into that condition, but stay there for the length of time that they do.
Yeah, the grief process makes this very clear. First of all, you'll be in denial, then you'll get angry, then you'll start bargaining with whatever it is, then you'll get depressed about the fact that you can't bargain your way out of it. Most people will stay...
And finally you'll accept it.
No, not at all. This was the point. They said that the fifth stage, acceptance, is one that the vast majority of people will never reach.
Won't get to.
And I was like, whoa, okay. So this is why I think Schopenhauer...
They'll die before they hit it in many cases. Yeah, in most cases.
Well, it's coming to grips with truth, an internal truth or an external truth. Schopenhauer said that the truth is first ridiculed, then it is violently opposed, and then it is accepted as self-evident. Gandhi said, first they ignore you, then they fight you, then you win. They're describing the grief process: denial, anger, bargaining. But they left out those two later stages. I think maybe because if you want to build a positive revolution out of something, don't tell people you're going to get real depressed while doing it.
Yeah. And it tends to work that way. Yeah.
And it was like, why do we never reach acceptance? Why did I reach acceptance? Why did you reach acceptance? Or have we even reached acceptance? Or are we? Or because it's a cycle, right? You'll go into new denials and then go through anger, bargaining, blah, blah, blah. So your grief process becomes more or less endless. And I think essentially, as Gandhi and Schopenhauer really came to things with it, is that the grief process is the acceptance of truth, the process of accepting truth. Some people are incapable and may never be able to do it. And what is the difference between somebody who is capable of accepting truth and somebody who is not? And I was just thinking maybe it was because I had a lot of mentors come into my life who knew a lot more than me, older, wiser men who saw potential in me and invested their time, invested their effort. And so I realized that because I was valued by other people, that I did in fact have value. It wasn't just in my head. More or
self-respect.
And that was
because that self-respect.
That's right, and that's because I actually had to do things in order to obtain that respect. And one of my interviews I did, you talked about this concept called the wounded healer, and that it is this, that the time when you are in the most pain, the healing that you need is to talk with somebody who's been through similar pain and come through it out the other end. Now we have... Dirk Diggler, who's asked us a question: how has the internet changed us? By the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to ask a question, go into the chat room and send us a wee super chat, and we'll answer your questions. How has the internet changed us, Mark?
Well, I think it's certainly made the transformation of consciousness very possible at a much faster pace than was possible without it. The world of knowledge is available at our fingertips. Information about the occult is available at our fingertips. Information about real, genuine spirituality is available at our fingertips at any time on just about any device. So I think alacrity of information flow is faster than it ever has been. I think availability of information is more widely available and spread much more widely than it ever has been. And that means that there's really no excuse for people in ignoring or refusing to accept the truth of what's going on. That's an internal decision. It's a willful decision now. It's not something that we can claim is unavailable to us that we couldn't possibly have known. The internet has made nescience impossible. Nescience means not to know through no fault of your own because the information is not available, as opposed to ignorance, or as I like to call it, ignorance, which means you are actively, willfully refusing to accept the presence of something and acknowledge it and take it in. You are willfully refusing to look at something. That's what it means to ignore something. So I think the internet has sort of destroyed someone's ability to remain nescient, and in continuing not to know the things that are really important for us to know regarding morality, natural law, the state of human freedom, etc. One has to be willfully ignorant now, and that's kind of the choice that it has put before us. Because it is a repository of information and human knowledge that is, not really been attained in past world history. So I think it's a powerful thing. Of course, there's also a lot of dross up on it, and there's a lot of needless information that sometimes can make it difficult to weed through all of that and separate the wheat from the chaff, as it were. But I think it's possible if you just develop some, even moderate abilities to search the web using a search engine and or look at some less traveled areas of the web, like some BitTorrent sites, etc. I think anybody with a decent connection to the internet can tap the repository of knowledge that it is and extract the spiritual gold from it if they want it. Nothing is hidden anymore. It is triggered what I would consider the apocalypse, which is the great revealing. That's what apocalypse means, from apo, meaning to remove or to take away, and kalyptine in Greek, the verb meaning to hide or to conceal. So literally it means to remove the veil, to remove the thing that is concealing something, or to reveal the truth. That's what an apocalypse is. It's a great revealing. That's why the book Apocalypse in the biblical sense is called Revelation, the revealing. We're living in the internet has pushed us into post-apocalyptic times. It triggered the apocalypse, and then it moved humanity into what I call post-apocalypse, meaning the reveal has already occurred. And we are living in a time that has happened after the great revealing of knowledge. Now it's all about, did we accept it or did we reject it? And now what is going to be the consequence as a result of that? And I think that's still in transition. That process is not, that post-apocalyptic period is still not there. The information has been revealed. People are still in the process of accepting it, processing it, and accepting it, and or rejecting it. We'll receive the consequence on the other side of the post-apocalyptic period, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I was just thinking about Kevin Costner's movie there when it talks about a post-apocalyptic society where in order to bring society back, he became a postman. Yeah. That's
I love that movie. I
like
think it's
it too.
a great movie about tyranny, where that becomes a feudal society, which it already is now. They're just talking about this world now, and just putting it in that, post-apocalyptic, post-Armageddon framework. And I think it was pretty well done. I mean, it has a powerful, positive message about moving information and uniting people, and standing up to tyranny. So I think if people haven't seen it, I think it's a very valuable movie to watch with very good themes regarding tyranny versus freedom.
And the person who asked the question about the internet says, right on, gentlemen, thanks for your perspective. Couldn't agree more.
Thank you. Great question.
I was reminded about the recruitment of a scumbag. Okay, so what happened is allegedly back in the day, I think the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers or something. I forget who did this, but they put an ad in the paper saying, if you are a person who wants to screw other people over, who would sell your own grandmother for $1 and so on and so forth and everything, like all these horrific characteristics and things like that, and they put it in the paper. And the person that allegedly answered the ad was JP Morgan or something like that. And it was the kind of concept where they want to get the worst kind of people. And yep, sure, Mark. We'll let you go in 5 minutes. In fact, we'll just close this up in just a few seconds. In fact, they wanted to recruit the worst kind of people who already knew that they were the worst kind of people, more or less. Right? And I thought that's very interesting because you know you can trust a really bad person to do really bad things because you know that they can't be trusted, right? and so I think at one point I tried to do a similar thing, trying to recruit for a political party. Do you want to be a statesman for your community where you want to serve, you don't want to rule? Do you want to think about things as opposed to accept authority and all of these kind of things? And nobody replied to the post. Right. And at one point I was just kind of like, is that a reflection of society that there aren't those kind of good people out there? But then, because it was out in the ether, theoretically, maybe not, one person with such characteristics did come into the party. And it was like, it was great to see them there. And that was kind of like one of the points of this show, actually, today, ladies and gentlemen, is to get a few people who are reasonably inspiring and know what the fuck they're talking about and know what to do, at least about some of the aspects of society that we are faced with as we speak. So, Mark, thank you very much. And for those of you who didn't catch James Corbett earlier on in the broadcast, this show will be available directly afterwards. So, Mark, if you've got any final words before we chuck off, go for your life.
Vinny, I'd first like to say thank you to our guest, James. He did a brilliant job. So thanks for participating in this roundtable discussion. And Vinny, I want to thank you for all the work that you have done and continue to do. I consider you at the top of the alternative media field. And I think that you are a true mainstay in this community, and you bring top-notch information, top-notch guests, and even great humor to the table in doing what you do. So I thank you for doing what you do. For those who want to look further into my material, my website is whatonearthishappening.com. And as always, I highly recommend for people to take in the full body of my work, particularly my podcast audio series, which moves into my current video series. And there are 201 episodes of that available for free up on the site. I always recommend people to take them in order, from starting at number 1 and moving forward at your own pace, where you will get the maximum benefit, and which will really help to transform your understanding of what's taking place in our world and your overall worldview. So that's my main website, and there's also tons of videos up there, all for free for people's viewing. Whatonearthishappening.com. And Vinny, thank you again for bringing me on again to the show. It's always a pleasure to be on the Vinny Eastwood Show, so thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure to talk with me, but it's an honor to speak with you. Now,
I appreciate that.
I hope you do. Now, because it's genuine. Now, there's this other element. I just want to quickly tell this to the audience. Okay. Money matters, okay, where your money goes and all of that kind of stuff. And I wish I could lie to you, ladies and gentlemen, and say that if you donated to the Vinny Eastwood Show or started up an automatic payment, you would feel better, that your life would change in radically better ways. But it's not gonna. Okay, but if you listen to the show on the other hand, and you start listening to all of these very interesting people with all of these very interesting and different perspectives over long periods of time, you will learn at a geometric rate, much faster than you can listening to ordinary talk radio. I think even my first year of talk radio, I had some of my first time listeners saying, Vinny, I've been listening to you for a couple of months now, and I've learned more in those couple of months than the last 20 years of talk radio. And that's because, ladies and gentlemen, normal talk radio works like this. I'm going to repeat this, and then I'm going to repeat it again. Enlightening talk radio talks like this. We're just going to talk about some really interesting shit. We don't care where it goes. We don't care what the consequences are. We're just going to talk about it. And we're going to fucking listen. And you only get to hear it once. And if you press replay, you can hear it twice. That's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. We're not going to repeat you. We're not going to try and brainwash you. We're not trying to mislead you. We just want your money so we can continue doing the good work. All right? That's the thing. And I've been doing so for 10 years, and so far none of my investors have been really pissed off about their investments. So hopefully, ladies and gentlemen, you can take a lesson from that. The VinnyEastwoodShow.com is the website. That's Vinny with a Y because it's the most important question, and Eastwood, like, go ahead, make my news. Thanks very much. We'll see you again sometime.